Hello, now we are going to talk about the session state patterns of the enterprise application architecture patterns. And when we talk about session, we need to think about business transactions. So business transaction comprises several system transactions. But in this case, we also consider that in this business transaction includes several requests from the user. So the business transaction executes in the server, and the client is going to do several requests, and each one of the requests needs to take in consideration the previous request. So the previous request produced something, and the next request to be processed needs to consider what is produced. And actually, what is produced is not a final state, is not a consistent state. So it's not stored in the database as a consistent state. That's why we say that they are these different requests are in the context of the same business transaction. So the problem related with this is the problem of having dealing with this session. The best solution is that you don't need to have a session. So stateless servers is the best solution, because this is something that you need to deal with and to worry about. Look, if you have 1,000 clients sending requests, and if you need to have a session for each one of them, then you need to have 1,000 different objects storing the information of the clients. Of course, you always have a session for an object, but usually what you have in this session is, for instance, immutable information like the token. So when you send the token to the client, the client sends you back the token, so that you don't need to log in for every request. So that's in the session. But in this case, there are two characteristics of this. The first is that is immutable, so the value basically is always the same. And the second is that is not a lot of information, that's very few bytes. But when you start including the session information that is related with the semantic of your application, which is relating with the type of business logic you are processing, then you need to deal with this information in different ways, because it probably is a lot of information. You need to check this information. So the next request, consider that some of the information is already implemented, is already in the database or in the server. Okay, so there are three solutions to do this. Either you store the information in the client, in the server, or in the database. And what is interesting about these patterns is that depending where you store the session, you have different trade-offs in terms of the qualities you can achieve. For instance, if you store in the client, it's very nice to deal with there's a crash in the server or in the database. Why? Because the information is in the client. So when the server comes up again, it's just the client sends a new request to the server, sends the information, and everything is okay. But of course, there's an overhead about sending the information from one side to the other, and there's a problem of security, for instance, because you need to encrypt the data, because someone can corrupt it, for instance. So what is interesting, another aspect is, for instance, you can store it in the database, but then it can be rather complex, because then this information is not consistent, and you need to keep it separated, or need to distinguish the information that is related with a session that is not consistent with the consistent information in the database. And this can be a huge overhead. Of course, if the information is in the database, this is very nice if you have a cluster of servers, because then the session is in the database and you don't worry, so all the servers share the same session. So read these patterns and enjoy.